Another surprise, as if there hasn't been enough. On this show so far, we talked about a surprise return or debut for New Jack, and also a surprise for Bart Gunn. Well, now here we are, new week, new pay-per-view, new surprise. This time Mike Awesome is going to surprise and make a debut to defeat Perry Saturn by DQ when Sandman and New Jack interfere. But the Torch would point out how heavy Awesome was for this match. Mike Awesome was one of my absolute favorites. I was excited to see him here, even if he didn't look exactly like Mike Awesome used to. What can you tell us about Mike Awesome?
Mike came to Tennessee in the territory days. I think his first job out of Florida, or one of the very first. So we had known each other a long time. And as the sheets weren't kind to him in his appearance, but look, it's Mike. Maybe he wasn't exactly like it was. It was that unrealistic expectation. But again, the building blocks of TNA the early years are bring guys in and rent them. Don't mind. That's it. It was that simple. And Mike, what a sweetheart of a guy, man.
Man, he's one of those guys I just felt like for sure when WCW went down and he wound up, doing the one night stand show and well, even before that, he was around the WWF for a cup of coffee. Just in my head, considering how big he was and the stuff he could do on the top rope and that look and all that, it was like Vince McMahon is going to just eat this guy up. He's going to love him. And then it never really happened. Why do you think that was?
It's one of those kind of, I can't call it a head scratcher. Me and you both been around long enough, but it's one of those guys that the timing never really, really, really lined up for him. I think is definitely a part of it. B is I would never, ever, I don't say Mike was a bad business guy, but he was never aggressive enough. And I don't say aggressive. The initial proactive, yeah, to kind of get in there and push for himself. And there's a part of that you absolutely have to do. You got to take initiative. And I'm not saying, I think Mike was kind of in that way, a dude from the beach that kind of took life on life's terms and see how it rolled. But I'm like you, had Vince or even, WCW, he was in and out there, but he definitely is a guy that I thought never came close to reaching his potential. Never.
Checks a lot of boxes, put on some incredible performances with Paul Heyman. I just knew it and it didn't happen. Yep. And I hope everybody was listening, not just people in the business, but people not just in the wrestling business, but people in business in general. Listen to what Jeff said there. Sometimes you got to fight for yourself. Sometimes you got to advocate for yourself. And I know that some of our mutual friends, I actually had a friend in town a few weeks ago who said, "Oh, I don't call anybody. If they want to do business with me, they've all got my number." And I appreciate that approach to life because you don't want to come off as desperate and they know me and if they need me. But at the same time, let me just say this, man, if you ain't willing to talk about you, who is? If you ain't going to brag about what you're doing, who is? Don't be in the secret service, as I like to say. Let people know what you're doing.
Randy Savage, who sat me down and kind of gave that lesson. Jeff, you got to stay in the game. You got to absolutely, sometimes he would give it a ship analogy that, hey, you got to stay in the boat. And if you're going to jump from one boat to the next, make sure you have a net, blah, 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 blah. But you got to keep rowing and you got to stay on top and not maybe on top, but visible and grind. There was just, he had a mentality and look, his father taught him so much and Lanny and, a family business and they run IWF, just Randy's whole mentality. When you kind of look at his life story and the baseball, that career didn't pan out and he got into wrestling and then they started their own promotion and ran literally opposite of my father's promotion in Lexington and a bunch of other towns, Paducah and up in Illinois, but they ran opposition And when that didn't work out, most folks' pride and ego would have said, I'll work for anybody but Jerry Jarrett. I'll go to Texas. I'll go to California. I'll work for anybody but the folks that I've knocked for the last year. Randy had a different mentality. He dove in and said, okay, let's make some money out of this. And so I think Randy, for me, was one of those really good examples of staying aggressive, taking the initiative, and saying, hey, let's do something here with me.